Babies are so good at it. And the reason why is if they weren't good at it, they would not survive. You know, that's how babies learn what's safe and what's scary. What I can do, what I shouldn't do, by focusing intently on the adults that they care about and reading those emotional states really fast and then absorbing those emotional states into themselves. Well, when a baby is laying in a crib and the baby starts crying, and then the parent comes and picks up the baby, does the parent pick up the baby and then just hold the baby? No, the parent typically moves at the same rate that the baby is moving at. And then the parent slowly calms down, and then over time the baby calms down too with the parent, because the baby starts mirroring the emotional state of the parent. The parent picks the baby up and matches that baby in terms of just how active that baby is, and then after a while the baby latches into and synchronizes with the parent, and then the baby calms down along with the parent. And we don't have to typically teach parents how to do this. Just kind of know that that's what you do. When you have a young child who's looking at the stranger and then looks at the parent to be able to gauge, that's a clue to us that when we're talking about young children going into preschool classrooms, it is exceedingly important that the parent and the teacher have a strong connection, because that child is going to gauge the safety of that teacher from the connection that their parent has to that child. I've been asked oftentimes by parents, what is the best way to help my child with the first day of kindergarten? And usually when it's something like, you know, I have to put my child on a bus for the first time. My child's starting kindergarten, what's the best way to help my child deal with that? And usually when parents tell me that, what I really hear is, what is the best way for me to deal with how scary this is? For me to put my child on a bus and send my child to kindergarten. And we may think that, you know, preschool is young. We may think kindergarten young, first grade. Whenever you first put your child on a bus, that's the definition of young. You know, because that child's going to feel really young when you're letting that child go away from you to a school. And usually my best answer to that is something along the lines of, make sure that you feel comfortable with that person you're putting that. Have you met the bus driver yet? Do you know the bus driver? Do you feel comfortable around the bus driver? If you don't feel comfortable, your child's not going to feel comfortable. And you're not going to be able to hide it. You know? If we could have opportunities for our parents and our preschool teachers to interact in more solid ways, that would probably go a long distance in terms of actually reducing the likelihood of a child being expelled, because the likelihood of expelling a child when you have a strong connection to the parent is pretty small. And if the child has a strong connection to the parent and the parent has a strong connection to the teacher, that parent's going to lend that connection to the child, and then the child's going to be better connected to the teacher. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. So remember this one? One more click. The more access to a behavioral consultant or somebody who can in the classroom, the less likely a child is to be expelled. Next slide. So in Connecticut, we created a statewide system of early childhood mental health consultation. And that system costs us to cover the entire state a little over $2 million. Covers the entire state. It's available to all programs, public or private, that serve children birth up to 5 years old. So if you're a public school-based pre-K program, yes. If you're a Head Start program, yes. If you're a mom and pop child care program, or a for-profit child care program, yes. If you're an infant toddler program, yes. If you're offering child care services in your home as a home-based child care program, as an independent business, yes, it covers you too. And so any program, public or private, that requests somebody who can come into the program and assist with a child who has a challenging behavior is able to get this free of charge to the program. All paid for by the state of Connecticut through our state Department of Children and Families, which is our child protection agency. So our state child protection agency sets aside about $2.6 million a year just specifically for this program. It's classroom-based. When I talk about these kind of programs, the consultant comes in and coaches and works with the teachers. What happens is not the consultant coming in, and these are all master's level mental health providers who have specialized training in how to work with young children and how to work with teachers, and how you work through a teacher. They don't come into the classroom and pull a child out and do some mental health magic in the hallway. That is not what they do. Instead, what they do is they work with the child by working through the teacher. And coach the teacher on different ways that the teacher can be interacting with these children, because we will never have enough mental health providers to treat all of our children one child at a time. We'll never be able to get ahead of it that way. The only way to be able to do this is to be able to provide some kind of support to the child in a way that leaves a residual there with the teacher. And so how can we work with the teacher in order to not only help that teacher with this one child, but help that teacher with all the subsequent children that might come into this child's classroom? It's interesting that we're in this room right here. This is where the juvenile justice, the criminal justice committee is. How many people have heard about the Prairie Preschool study and all that? Every dollar that's spent on early care and education yields $7.14. How many, and that's by the time the children are 27 years old, how many people know that of that $7.14, 6 of those dollars is juvenile justice and criminal justice? Most of it has to do with reducing challenging behaviors later on in life. And when you think about, sort of like what is the impact of all of this work that we do, the impact of this work that we're doing is really to try to make sure that our children are less likely to be engaged in criminal activity later on, more likely to be graduating from high school, more likely to be able to have a gainful employment and paying into the taxes instead of drawing money out of the taxes. These mental health consultants work with the teachers in order to make sure that these children are able to stay in the preschool program, because one child that I can tell you that never benefits from preschool is the child who gets kicked out. That child doesn't benefit from it. But we also know from lots of science that the children you would want to kick out from a preschool program, those are the children that give you the return on the investment. It's the children who have the most to gain that tend to gain the most from preschool programs. And when you kick them out, all that happens is they just sit around and they grow bigger and then they go to kindergarten. And then you have to deal with them there. Yes, sir.
Doctor, it says there's a home-based component. Can I assume that there's some kind of parent management training that's a component of this?
Yeah, so let me tell you quickly basically what happens. Go to the next slide. It's only 3 months long. Again, it's not this. It's not talking to babies on a couch. It's working directly with teachers. Next slide. There's a study, and I can get you in contact with this paper that we recently published on this program in Connecticut, describing the program and also describing what the effects of the program is. To briefly state it, what it is it's a 3-month-long intervention with these mental health consultants. We take advantage of people who are already in child guidance clinic in the state. Nobody new was hired to do this work in Connecticut. These are already extant mental health providers that we then provide extra training to. And then we mobilize them to preschool classrooms when the teacher needs them. What we typically do in mental health services is we have mental health providers who are in clinics, and then we wait for things to deteriorate so bad that the child needs to go to the mental health clinic. What if we didn't think of it this way? And what if we instead mobilize the same exact resources? Instead, what we want is we want these support people to be mobilized into preschool classrooms before we absolutely have them work with our children. What if we did it that way? And what if we took advantage of the fact that we could have partnerships between preschool teachers who are dying for support and mental health providers who are waiting for children to deteriorate? And what if instead we provided better collaborative opportunities through that? That's basically what this model is about here. So the mental health consultant goes and then they meet with the teacher in the classroom, they watch what's happening, and then they immediately set up an appointment with the parent. Why immediately? Because if you wait too long, the consultant is going to be seen as being too aligned with the school. And usually by the time a mental health consultant is requested, things have already not been going well with the parent and the teacher because of the child's challenging behaviors. And so the last thing you need is for the consultant to look too in camp with the teacher. And so the consultant will then immediately meet with the parent, find out the story. Remember the story I told you before about the child who was left with dad at 2.5 years old? Find out the story, and then see how much of the story is this parent willing to share with the school. Because sharing the story may not fix the problem, but it will at least buy you time. And once you have some time, then you have an opportunity to repair the relationship between the teacher and the parent. Then the consultant starts coaching the teacher on different ways to interact with the child, largely from things that they've already learned from the parent about what things are working at home. And they start sharing information in both directions, with the consultant then meeting with the parent and the teacher together, and then in the beginning playing a very large role in these meetings, And then over time, slowly pulling herself out of the relationship to leave behind a strong relationship between the parent and the teacher. That's what the mental health consultant is doing during this time. It's brief, it's only 3 months long based on the Connecticut model. It's fairly intensive, and the consultant's spending about 6, 8 or more hours per week in the classroom with the teachers, and spending about 3 or 4 hours in home visits, meeting with the parent, and then meeting with the parent and teacher together.
So is the bill that's coming up here, Senator Green, is it your bill?
Yes, it is.
Is that to do this?
It's to set up a voluntary consultation program.
Okay.
So folks who are working with these kids 0 to 5 will have resources to call on to do exactly what Dr. Gilliam is talking about.
Okay.
And there's no mandate that providers have to do it, and there's also no prohibition in it on expelling kids. I think Connecticut is a little bit more assertive in that regard than this bill is. So, yeah, and it's going to the Education Committee.
Okay.
In Connecticut, we started out, much like you're describing, we started out providing the support service, providing the early childhood mental health consultation. And then we found out that it was literally so successful that we wanted to encourage more people to utilize it. And so the way in which we think of this is we have the mental health consultation to give the teachers the support they need so they don't have to expel anybody. And then we provided prohibitive language, because then once we provided the prohibitive language, it drove people towards this thing that we were providing them that we already knew was successful. The challenge, I think, is if a state does one without the other, you can sometimes fall a little bit short. So like if for instance, you provide mental health consultation but no prohibitive language, then it's possible that you provide a service that people could benefit from, but it will never be as easy to use that service as it is to just tell children to never come back. You know, so some of the times that's the challenge that we can run into, but it's a far better challenge than the opposite challenge of if you provide prohibitive language without providing a supportive service. Because once you provide prohibitive language without a supportive service, then programs start to realize, oh, I can't expel any child, so I'm going to be really careful who I let in the first place. And they start looking at the children, and they start basing assumptions on things that we might not want them basing assumptions on about which child they will later wish they could expel, and they won't let that child in. You know, so if you were to do one without the other, I think the way you're doing it makes a whole lot more sense than have the prohibitive language legislation without any support at all. Next slide. I don't know, how much time do we have? Probably no time. Oh, I should tell you this. Statewide random control trial in Connecticut, where we randomly assign classrooms to either get the consultation immediately or wait 3 months. And then we evaluated based on the amount of behavior problems that the children had in the classroom in a 3 month period of time, significant reduction in challenging behaviors. If you want to look at the study that we did, we also cost quantified how much it cost per child to be able to provide the services and compared it to any alternative that could be made available, such as outpatient psychotherapy, special ed placement, parent loss of time in employment because the child's expelled. This is as cheap as it gets. This is really a very cheap intervention to take advantage of people who are already mental health providers in a community and then give them the skill sets they need in order to be able to work with preschool teachers who are dying to have anybody who's willing to come to their classroom. Next slide. I don't know.
Now to one
have
of the
time
biggest
for this.
challenges American schools
have time
face
for
right
this?
now,
It's a
meeting the
7-minute
mental
clip.
health needs of students. This morning, we're going to focus on the youngest brains in the system,
This is
preschoolers. In 2012, some
the
6,700
issue
children
of
enrolled
children being
in public
expelled from
pre-K
preschool
around the
programs in
country were
Connecticut,
suspended.
highlighting our
Experts
program.
argue that suspending a 3 or 4-year-old, no matter how bad the behavior, is a bad idea. New research out this week highlights a powerful alternative to simply sending a child home. Corey Turner of the NPR Ed Team has the story.
It's playtime for Miss Terry Walker's preschool class. They're bouncing off the walls of a small YMCA gymnasium in a low-income neighborhood of Bridgeport, Connecticut. While most kids play tag, one boy wearing bright orange socks heads straight for a crate in the corner. There, among the balls and cones, he finds a long plastic stick. Miss Terry, what are you doing?
There's not enough time. So if anybody wanted to